Hi, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Find Your Way to Vibe. I'm Amber, and I'm really grateful you're here today. Originally, I had something completely different planned, but life, as it often does, gently nudged me in another direction. A few conversations, a few moments of reflection, and suddenly I found myself standing in the shower, just thinking about value and worth and just how far I've come. And at that moment, I realized it's probably best to start with my story. Not the whole thing, obviously. That would literally take dozens of episodes, but the part that shaped me the most, the part that sent me on the healing journey that I've been on for several years, and the part that ultimately birthed Way to Vibe. So take a breath with me, settle in, and let's begin. Before we begin, let's take a slow breath together. Wherever you are, allow yourself to arrive. This is your invitation to slow down, to listen inward, to remember what matters, and to walk gently into this space with me. Welcome to Find Your Way to Vibe. All right, welcome back, everyone. Just a few days ago was episode 0, where I shared a little bit about myself and what this space is all about. If you missed it, you can head back over to the main podcast page or wherever you listen to your podcasts and start there. And this week, I felt called to share a little bit more about my story so you can better understand where I came from and how I arrived to my now. But before we dive into that, I want to share how I found my way to vibe this week. This week, my way to vibe has been centered around this podcast itself. Getting organized, refining what I've learned, and preparing to bring something to life that's been quietly forming for quite some time. It's been a bit of a wild ride to get here. And once I realized this is actually happening, I knew I needed to really honor that within myself. And I wanted to show up fully, not just halfway. And to really put my whole self into it, because this has been years in the making. And if I'm being honest, it's pretty much been my whole life that I've been creating some form of this. And as a part of getting ready, I went back through some of my old journals from when I started the Way to Vibe era of my journey. And it really stirred up a lot of things. I was reading back some of those pages, and it really put me back in that space and time. And it brought up the old wounds that were there. And I really tried not to get stuck there. But honestly, I wasn't that successful. I hoped I would be a little more successful just with all the progress that I made. But one thing I could tell is that I started to feel myself go upstream again. I could start feeling those feelings that I had in those moments. And that was got my nervous system going. However, This time, even though I felt all of that stirring up inside me, it was a little bit different because instead of falling into my old patterns of being numb with it all or shutting down in the moment, I decided to, instead of just completely shutting down, I just chose to slow down instead. And I gave myself a little grace to feel the feelings that were stirring within me. And I asked myself why those words or those journal entries were stirring so deeply. And what I realized is this: it wasn't that those memories were pulling me back into something painful. They were actually showing me just how far I've come. And while there was a lot of relief that I feel like I've grown so much, there was a lot of sadness for that version of me who carried that all that heaviness and all that chaos for so long. But there was also clarity and gratitude because that journey, as hard as it was in the moment, made this moment possible. And it reminded me why moving forward with Way to Vibe matters so much to me. And even when that small voice sneaks in and whispers, maybe you should stop, Amber, I decided not to listen this time. And this time I said, no, no more stopping. We're going to stop stopping. Because that's why I found myself waiting for so long, is because I kept stopping. And I'm not stopping this time. I am not going to stop just because the echoes of my past, or I'm not going to stop because I get thrown challenges my way. I'm no longer willing to let any of that write my story or control my narrative, because this is my story, and all of the parts, the bad, the good, the in-betweens, all of it is mine. So I'm going to take all that power back and put all of the good, all of what I've learned, all of the wisdom, all of the struggles, all of the good times, the laughs, the sadness, the happiness, all of it. I'm going to ball it all together, and I'm going to share that because that's my story. I've kind of known all along that I was going to live my life the way I wanted to. And it showed up for me since I was young. And I always knew that my destiny was going to lead up to something. I just didn't know what it was. But I knew that if I kept trying to move forward and create the life that I really wanted to live, that I would get here somehow. And while it's just the beginning of this new era for me, I know that it's going to be an exciting one. And I'm just really excited to see how everything pulls in together. So yeah, we're a go. We're here. We're doing it. And honestly, I've had a lot of fun putting it all together. It's been fun to finally use a lot of skills that I've learned throughout the years. It will be good to share the wisdom I've learned along the way from either my experiences or the people I've met along the way, or just in the various ways that we learn wisdom. And just the parts that sat dormant for far too long. Now, I want to hear yours. What helped you reconnect with yourself? What moment made you breathe a little bit deeper? What brought you back home to you? Share it with me. I'm excited to hear how you found your Why Divide. Now, I want to bring you into one of my favorite parts of the show, the Trail of Gratitude. For this segment, we take a moment and write down or just simply think of whatever we're grateful for in the moment. It could be one thing, it could be three things, it could be many things, whatever you decide today. As you write yours down, I'll share mine from my journal. And if you'd like to share your entry, you can head over to the contact page at findyourwaytovibe.com and submit it there. My intention is, as the podcast grows, I want to begin featuring the listener gratitude list on the show, because I really feel that this is something that can help all of us. And it's something that has really changed my life. I started this practice back in 2021. I was going through a very emotional year, and I kept finding myself just spiraling into the negative mindset. And so I knew I needed to do something to change, because I was bringing home all the crap from work, from traffic, from whatever it was, and I was walking through that door to my house where my kids are peaceful, and I didn't want to do that to them anymore. So I sat down and tried to figure out a way to help myself set all that down before I walked in the door. So when I was experiencing all these negative emotions, I decided that before I walked in the door, I was going to sit down in my garage. I had a little chair and my candle and my journal and my pen out there. And I would get home, sit down in my chair, take a few deep breaths, and then I would just write something. And I just spent about 10 minutes writing down what I was grateful for. And I realized that it started to help me remember all of the wonderful things that I have in my life and all the wonderful people that I have in my life, and focusing on those things. And it really helped to shift my mindset. It became one of those practices where when I caught myself going into those negative spirals, I would start thinking about what I was grateful for. That was my momentum to change. And it took me a while, because it's not easy to go from a negative mindset and change it so quickly. As I continued this practice throughout the 3 months that I did it every single day, is that when I started going into those negative mind spirals, if I would just tap into something that I was grateful for in that moment and think about that for a minute, it helped to shift my perspective. It helped shift my mind to focus on all the things that I could be grateful for. And it helped bring me down enough to walk through that door and have a more positive energy for my kids. And it really was a good thing for me. Even on hard days when I never thought I could pull myself out, when I felt my nerves just on fire, I was really surprised by how much I was still grateful for, and how quickly I could pull myself out of that spiral. At one point, I exhausted all the big things that most people can tap into. I found myself reaching a little bit deeper and finding more things to be grateful for. I wrote down I'm grateful for my garage because it was a space of peace for me for 10 minutes to gather myself and put my head straight. I'm grateful for chapstick because thank goodness for chapstick. I'm grateful for the pen I'm writing with. I'm grateful for nail clippers. I'm grateful for the birds chirping in the morning, reminding me that life is here. You keep digging deeper. And that's one thing I really love about this practice is really anything you encounter can be something you're grateful for, even small things that we rush past. And still to this day, I practice gratitude in some form every day. I may not always sit down and write it in my journal anymore, though I probably should start doing that again. But when I feel myself slipping into that negative space, I can immediately find something to be grateful for and focus on it. And it helps quiet the noise. So to begin this segment, I want to share something I wrote when I first started this practice. This entry is from July 30th, 2021. And I wrote, "Today I share gratitude for all I have in my life that leads me back to me. I'm grateful for my children, my family, my friends, and all of my guardian angels that have gone before me. I'm grateful for the knowing within, guiding me along my uniquely beautiful journey." So that's what I wrote to start it off. And that's what started a very meaningful practice for me, is remembering that to be grateful for everyone that shows up for me. And that was my kids, my friends, my family, and myself as well. I sometimes forget how much I show up for myself. And so that was it. That's what started this. And I really want to continue to focus on the gratitude. And I invite you to walk this path with me. It's as simple as that. Just one or two sentences, a few words, a note in your phone, a quick list on a piece of paper, or even just something you quietly think to yourself. If you're driving right now, maybe it's, "I'm grateful the flow of traffic feels easy today. I'm grateful to have time to listen to my favorite podcasts. I'm grateful I have time to just listen to the music and let my hair down, have a little personal concert in my car." Whatever it is, even when things feel hard, there's still something. So I'm excited for this one. And that's the Trail of Gratitude. So as we leave the Trail of Gratitude, we are going to walk into the Way to Vibe topic of the day. And I really considered so many ways to begin my whole podcast journey. And I actually had a different episode planned for this one because Christmas is a few days away. But while I was decompressing after a long day of journal reading, I was just standing there and I was just letting everything settle. And I found myself reflecting on those entries and some of the conversations that I recently had, whether it was related to those or just the podcast or my journey in general. And one thing that kept rising to the surface was value and worth, and just how far I've come. And what shocked me a little bit was that it didn't really pull me back in a painful way, but it pulled me back in a remembering way. And I realized this is the story that I meant to share today, the short version at least. So while this story begins long before any of this, I decided that I'll tell you this story from post-graduation in 2001. That year is the year that shifted everything. And that is where my healing journey truly began. I didn't know it at the time that I was starting any kind of a journey. I was still young and had no idea. I was so naive about life. But looking back at it all now, I know that there were little tidbits that were signs along the way, especially the people that started to show up in my life around that time. So here's where it starts. Right after high school, I got married. And so I was married at 18. Shortly after we got married, I got pregnant and had my first child at 19, my daughter. And through all that, it was a little bit of chaos. We had moved to California right after high school. And then after we had our daughter, we moved back to Utah. And we really tried to find our beginning. And we had to find a place of our own, finding what we wanted to do for the rest of our lives, all of that fun stuff you do when you get married and decide to be responsible adults. And during that time, in the beginning, my husband ended up getting a DUI. And that was the trigger of, wow, there's a lot more going on here than I realized. And then shortly after that, 11 months later, he had another one. And that one was a month after I had our second child, my son. So at that point, I was caring for a preschooler, a newborn, and a grown man who needed constant assistance. I remember just feeling so, because I was working 2 jobs while taking care of a toddler, a newborn, and in addition to all of that, I was driving him to work, I was driving him to school, I was driving him to his mandated group counseling, to his regular counseling, to court. And this was all while I was trying to even take care of myself too. I don't even remember taking care of myself, to be honest. I was exhausted. I was physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, spiritually, you name it, whatever realm it is in, I was exhausted. But somehow I made it through, and I stayed because I believe that's what I was supposed to do. I thought it would get better, and I'm not quite sure how, but we made it through those early years, and good progress was being made, so I thought. And we eventually bought a house, And that's something that really should have been a beautiful milestone for us. And it was for me. I was really excited that we had our own house and the kids had their rooms. And it was actually my childhood home that we had bought from my parents. And so that was something that I was really looking forward to. But I would find out later that 2 days after we had signed the papers for our home, my husband began an affair with his coworker. And I wouldn't actually learn that truth until several months later. And I found it out only because I had my suspicions because I think that we kind of pick up on some things. But I really found out one night the power had gone out and we had a saltwater fish tank for the kids. We had the little Nemo fish tank and the power was out. If you don't have a backup anything, which we didn't, because we just had a small little cube fish tank, if you don't have a pump going, the fish could die because with a saltwater fish tank, you need to have the oxygen. You need to have the oxygen stirring or moving in the water. So my phone, unfortunately, at the time would not charge unless I had my phone off. And so since it was during the time we were sleeping, I had to borrow my husband's phone. And curiously enough, I was like, hey, can I just borrow your phone so that I can set the alarm for every 20 minutes so I can get up and stir the tank? And he was like, yeah, sure. But before he gave it to me, he took a good few minutes to give it to me. I was like waiting and he was like, hold on. And it just made me curious as to why. I didn't really think anything of it at that moment because my focus was, I'm going to do this. But that was when the alarm bells, my internal alarm bells started to go off. And those few minutes of him hesitating to hand me the phone truly began the spiral of our marriage and just of me, really. And a few months later, we were on our way to divorce. This was in 2008, and he asked me for a divorce. Finally, after months of lies and all of that stuff. And I didn't even know, like, I started to panic because I had literally sacrificed to give him his dream. He was going to school, he was doing all those things. And then there was me. I was still working at the job I had in high school and taking care of kids. I didn't have a foundation anymore. Like, he literally ripped the foundation out from under me, and I started to just, what am I going to do? I started to panic, and I needed to figure out a way to move forward. And with this new challenge I've just been thrown. And it was hard at first because before we even told our kids that we were separating, he was already introducing my kids to his new girlfriend and taking pictures with her and introducing her as new stepmom already. Like, and that was, I can't even tell you how much fury was in me at the time. I was so, it was very intense. But somehow, by the grace of God and a whole lot of support from my circle, I somehow kept my composure and I made it through. I was very blessed with a lot of amazing people who stepped in to help me during that time and to keep me focused on the positive path forward. I believe to this day that the people in my life, who many of them are still here, they are the reason why I was able to make it through without more chaos. And I will always, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to express how grateful I am to those people. But if they're listening, I hope you know how grateful I am for you, because without you, I know that I would have had a much harder time working myself through that one. So, anyways, by July 3rd of that year, I was actually in court fighting for permission to take my kids to California. This wasn't to rip them away from their dad. I do not believe in using children as chess pieces. I think that's just completely wrong, especially for our egos as adults. And so it was just a really hard decision I had to make. I had the choice of staying where I was and struggling harder to create a life, a new foundation for my kids and I, or I moved to California where I have a place, a safe space to be and to raise my kids and have support while I go to school and try to build a foundation for the kids and I. So we were in court, and the judge, I remember the judge asking me, why California? What is in California? You have family here, everything's here, so why California? And I told her that my parents had room for us and that they were going to help me with the kids as I go to school so that I could have some kind of fighting chance at building a strong, successful foundation to move forward for me and the kids so that we could thrive. And she looked at me and said, okay, so if I invited you back here in 5 years, what would you tell me? And without missing a beat, I said, I will have my bachelor's degree and I will be able to have the means to support my kids and give them the best life possible. And she granted it. I still remember the tension in my body releasing in that moment. There was a lot of sadness in leaving our family and our friends and our life in Utah, but I had hope. I had faith that it would all work out for us. And when we moved to California, everything began to shift. I had lost 30 pounds. My mindset changed. I enrolled in school and I was feeling really good about everything. I was like, yes, I'm on a good trajectory. Just keep moving forward in this momentum, Amber. You're doing great. In 2013, I graduated summa cum laude with my degree in business marketing. So I was really proud of myself for fighting my way through that one because it wasn't easy. But again, I had my support from my family. And especially because they supported me with the kids and they supported me through my schooling and they supported me through my healing. And so much gratitude for my family that understood and supported us. Even those in Utah, they were still, I know that they were rooting for us. And I really, during that time, I really pushed myself to grow. I tried to really balance my life as being a single mom, being a student, making friends, building a life. School was fun for me. Like, I made it fun for me. I took classes like hiking, weightlifting, and ballroom dance. And I chose these things because I was suffering from a bit of social anxiety, being in a new space and not really knowing who I was anymore. Like, I was becoming someone new and I was scared. And so I put myself in those classes on purpose because I figured if I'm feeling this, what's the best way to try and get out of that? And that was to put myself in really uncomfortable situations, social situations, to pull myself out of my shell. And it worked for the most part, probably a little too well, to be honest with you, because later I find myself thinking, what was I thinking? Putting myself into these social situations, right? But through all of that, I met wonderful people who brought joy back into my life, people who made me laugh, who went on adventures with me, who danced with me. I don't think they realized what they gave me during that time. It, but it brought light back to me when I needed it most. One thing we started to do also is we started doing mud runs at the suggestion of my mom. My mom knew that I was looking for something to do, something new. She knew I liked a challenge and all of that. She saw a sign and mentioned it to me, and me and my friends went and did our first mud run, which was a 5K, running through mud, doing some obstacles. And who knew that playing in mud could be so much fun? I don't remember playing in mud as a kid too much. I don't recall. Maybe I did. I don't know. But that turned into 7 years of endurance racing, eventually leading up to a death race. Endurance racing has taught me a lot about life, and I am excited to share that part of my life, but that's going to be a separate episode because I really want to. That one deserves an episode of its own. Around the time that I started to do the endurance racing, I also started to date again. And eventually I met my ex-fiance. Well, what a chapter that was. He was charismatic, he was fast talking. Oh, he caught me quick, caught me off guard. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Somebody's paying attention to me. Started to notice that he always needed to be front and center. If he wasn't front and center, he would definitely find his way to be front and center. I remember that many people would always say, it's not always about you. And that was literally a running phrase that was constantly said because that is the type of person he is. And I really didn't understand a whole lot back then about his personality type. And I didn't recognize narcissistic patterns. I don't even think I really knew what a narcissist was at that point in my life, but I learned. And from the beginning, there were red flags. I just didn't realize what they were at the time. And I just remember feeling very uncomfortable in certain situations. But I just convinced myself that I was just being ridiculous and I was just making things up in my head, making them bigger than they were. And every time I would question something or address something that was bothering me, I'd be the one doubting myself and feeling bad that I started something over nothing. But really, it was something. I was just being gaslit, which is also something I didn't even know what that was until much later. And for some reason, I stayed through all of it. And one thing I noticed during some of it is I started acting really out of character. I started getting really annoyed easily. My behavior just wasn't me. I was really shocked at myself sometimes because I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live for me. But I just kept thinking, like, no, it's fine. I'm just going through a funky moment right now. But, anyways, we did end up getting engaged and moving in together. We all moved together in a house, and things ended up getting darker. And from the outside looking in, it looked like a dream. We had a beautiful space near the mountains. We had bears, nature, peace. Should have been wonderful. But behind closed doors, he was drowning in alcoholism. And this wasn't DUIs, wasn't the same as my ex-husband. It was a lot different. And I didn't see the signs until we moved in. And one thing that started happening is I noticed he would have weekend long binges. He would literally drink from Thursday night until Monday, often using my son as an excuse as to why he couldn't go to work, which is not cool in any shape or form because my son wasn't the reason why he was missing work. And it began to spiral into panic attacks, chaos, manipulation, everything. And I was trying to keep it together for my kids and myself, but I was losing myself quickly. I was angry, I was short, I was sad, and I really couldn't make a sense of what was happening in my life or in my mind. I literally thought I was going crazy. And again, I was acting out of character. I was being just a brat at times. And I was just experiencing a lot of guilt and a lot of what now I know I was being gaslit into thinking I was crazy. And yeah, that was a tough time. Then everything came to a head one weekend. We were doing a large event that he put on every year, when one that I was participating in. And he had started drinking early in the week. This event is a big thing. We would have a dinner and then we would lead into the event, and the event was a weekend long thing where people were running up and down mountains. There was a lot of logistics to it. And he was pretty much drunk all weekend. We had people from all over the United States there, and he was just having a good time. But people started to notice, and I was not okay. Like, I knew he wasn't okay because I had lived it for the last year and a half. And so that weekend, by the end of the weekend, I was tapped out. I was exhausted because I participated. And while I dropped out early, I was still helping with everything. I was still helping with one of the participants was in the emergency room because he fell. So I was helping with that. I was helping clean up. I was doing all the things. And I remember that we were up at the camp and I was about ready to go home, and I had noticed that he was not okay, but he was driving up and down the mountain. And I was like, I told one of his friends, I said, will you please get his keys from him? He cannot be driving up and down this mountain. And, I knew that if it was me, that it would be the end of it. I ended up taking the vehicle home, and because we had lived just down the road. And after that, I got phone call after phone call after phone call, and just was being obliterated by him. And so eventually, once the weekend was over, one thing that I had noticed is that in our bedroom, I had over, I want to say 100 beer cans and beer bottles scattered under my bed and in the closet. They were everywhere. I know that people knew something was going on, but I don't think they understood the extent of it. I know some of them did because we ended up having an intervention orchestrated by his friends but at the end of the weekend. But yeah, I'll never, that was intense. That was an intense moment in our relationship. And I knew that it wasn't going to go well because I was really just shattered by all of it at the moment. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew at the end is his friends decided to have an intervention. We were all in the room talking to him, and I'll never forget the moment really when during an intervention, my understanding of an intervention is you pull the person in and we all talk about it, and then we tell them, we draw our boundaries with that person. Like, if you don't stop drinking, then this happens. I'll never forget when I started to share my experience, or not my experience, but my boundaries. And, I started to draw my boundaries with him. One of his friends looked me straight in the eye and said, "This isn't about you. This doesn't impact you. So let's move on." And I was stunned. Like, I don't even think I had words after that because I couldn't believe that somebody who had issues with alcohol themselves, or maybe not themselves, but in their life as well, because they had told me they've had experience with all of this. I just couldn't believe that's what was being said to me. The fiance of the person they're having an intervention with, the one who's raising 3 children with in that time. I couldn't believe that he was just saying that it didn't impact me in any way. And I just sat there stunned, I think, for the rest of the time as they all went through and drew their own boundaries and told him how it impacted them. I mean, nobody saw what I went through every weekend. The nights that he woke up at 3 a.m. in a full panic mode, the screaming, the chaos. I mean, the mornings I still had to get up and go to work after he would wake me up. And it was just crazy. But yet I still had to keep moving and do everything I could for the kids. So it was really hard to hear that it didn't impact me because I felt like, aside from it, it impacted me and the children the most. So yeah, that was pretty hard for me to hear. Of course, after the friends had the intervention, I'm the one that had to take him to rehab at 2 o'clock in the morning and still go to work the next day, still take care of the kids, still clean up from the event over the weekend. I really didn't have any help. Everybody left and went on their merry way to move on in their life. And I was there to pick up the pieces. I had support from my friends from afar. I mean, if I needed to talk, they were there, and I appreciated that. But nobody knew that I was drowning in all of it either. And that was really hard for me. That was a really hard time for me. And I carried a lot of the weight during that time. I honestly don't know how I survived during that time. But I do remember that eventually I said to myself that I had to do something to keep myself going. And I put myself into therapy. I started going to support groups and just trying to rebuild and try to understand myself a little bit more and what I was living through, and tried to understand alcoholism on a deeper level and all the things. And then finally came the breaking point. When I was in a session with my counselor, I was telling him what I was going through, and he goes, "Well, have you considered sitting down and talking to him about it?" And I was like, well, he's been so busy. He goes, well, just say, hey, I want to have a conversation. So I did that. I asked him if we could sit down and have a conversation. I just want to explain to you what I'm experiencing right now. Can we have a conversation? And I remember him saying to me, when I get better, then we can get you the help you need. And he said it almost like that in his own way. And I just, again, just something just shattered in me. I was like, I felt it in my heart, but I also felt a freeing effect from those words because simultaneously, as my heart was breaking, it was like picking up a different pace, if I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, shortly after that sentence was said to me, I found the strength to end the relationship. I probably could have been a little bit more graceful, but I really didn't have any more grace in me after everything that I had experienced during that time because that was really, yeah, that during that time is when I really realized that I'm on my own. I may have people around me to support me, but with whatever I'm choosing to go through, like I'm on my own on this one. Yeah. Safe to say I ended that relationship and it was hard because I was scared. I didn't know where we were going to go. I ended up staying in the same house with him for a few more months because I refused to leave without having another place to go for me and my kids because I didn't feel that my kids should be punished for choices that I've made. And they had started to make friends and create a life where we had moved. But finally, we were able to move out. A wonderful couple gave us a chance in renting their home. And I am so grateful that they did give us that chance. It was still in the mountains. It was quiet. It was safe. It was a place where I could find my breath and that the kids could have some peace. And we created a home. I left. The only thing we left with was the things we brought in, the kids' bed, the kids' things, my personal things. But I left with no furniture. I left with nothing. Oh, and my washer and dryer because my parents had bought that for us when we moved into the house there. But that's, I walked out with practically nothing and we rebuilt, and it was the greatest thing to actually build our life together. And it was ours. And nobody could say, well, you can't have that. That's mine. Um, so yeah, that was the second time I walked out of a relationship with just my personal effects and the kids's and never looked back. And I was really grateful that I had the opportunity to build the life that we had. So thank goodness for that beautiful couple that gave us that chance. Unfortunately, about a year after they gave us that chance, they decided they wanted to move back in because that was their forever home. So I was back on the market for searching for a place. And luckily, the universe stepped in right on time. And the family, there was a house across the street who needed renters almost simultaneously. And my landlord was friends with them because they were neighbors for many years. And he gave me a glowing recommendation based off of that and my good rental history. They said yes. And so we literally carried all of our furniture across the street and we ended up staying there for 8 years. And this was 8 years of beautiful transformation. It wasn't easy. I was a single mom, one income in the state of California, It was a little intense, but we somehow made it through with a lot of strength, a lot of resilience, a lot of love and support. We made it, and we grew, and we healed, and we stumbled sometimes, many times, but we always knew that it would always work out for us. That was something that we would always say, and my daughter still reminds me to this day, as it always works out for us, no matter what it looks like in this moment. It always works out the way we need it to. So yeah, it was the healing era of my life, and I hold a very deep gratitude for that and for the memories, the healing, and the way it shaped us, who we are today. One of the greatest things for me was I only lived about a quarter of a mile away from the trailhead. And so that became my go-to healing practice. I would wake up super early in the morning and go hike when the owls were going to bed and the birds were waking up. It was pretty incredible space to be with myself and to listen to myself and to just really appreciate what Mother Nature provides for us. Another thing that was really great about where we lived is we were often visited by the bears. It was kind of strange because for some reason the bears liked our house, and we had a fenced yard. We had a vinyl fence with a gate, and then we had like a white picket fence yard. And these bears, they did not care. No worries on their part. They would just go straight. If they couldn't figure out a way around it and they didn't want to climb over, they would just go through it. And at one point, we ended up just taking the latch off the gate for the picket fence, because we would fix it and the bear would just shove it open and go through. And so it was just pointless. And then we had an open yard to where they could have gone around, so they didn't have to go through, but they would go through the vinyl fence. So we were the house known as the bear house, because the bears used our house as almost a gateway to get back home, to stay hidden. And of course, I love the bears so much. So it didn't bother me as much. The only thing that bothered me is if I had to clean up after them. Luckily, we had good bear locks, so they couldn't get into our trash cans, and they gave up after a while. So the only thing that annoyed me is when I would fix the fence and then the next night they would go through it again. And then also if I had to clean up after them. But it was fun. It was fun to be hiking and see a bear just sauntering along. And what was really great is there was a respect. It was almost like an unspoken mutual respect. The bears kept to themselves as long as you didn't bother them, and they would not bother you. So it was just a really cool bonus of where we lived. I miss it dearly. Bears, I just love them. We had a healthy fear, but we were respectful, and I think that that's what the difference is. A lot of people are scared of them, rightfully so, but I wasn't too worried about it all. Unfortunately, earlier this year, that chapter finally came to an end, and we had to move on. And I struggled to adjust to the new rhythm into a different space. But I eventually found it again. I found my rhythm. I found my way back to me. And I returned with a little bit more strength and a little more clarity and more purpose, which brings me to today. This podcast, this path, and the part of the journey I just shared. As messy as it was, as painful and unexpected as it was, it has been the most growth built transformational era of my life. It built me. It humbled me. It returned me to myself. And it led me here to Way to Vibe and to all of you. That's why I'm doing this podcast. Because through the chaos, through the suffering, and the hard moments, I knew there was another way forward. A way that included taking care of me so I could show up for myself and my kids. And I'll be honest, I carried anger for a very long time. Anger at those people. And anger at myself. Because at some point, I chose them to walk with me. But eventually, I learned how to put that anger down. And I found a way to be grateful. And I also understand that they are humans as well. And they were doing the best they could. With my ex-husband, I found gratitude. It took me a while, but I found gratitude. Gratitude for him subconsciously knowing that he couldn't be in the kids' lives for one reason or another. I know it's been hard, but I'm grateful that this was our path. I wish him well, and I hope he's thriving in his life. And that's where it ends. So there's that one. And with the ex-fiance, it took a little bit longer to find gratitude for him, but I found it in the lessons that he unknowingly taught me. And I realize now that not everyone has our best interests as their focal point. He taught me a lot about what I will never accept again. And he also taught me how much I could handle, how much I could carry and keep moving no matter what. And I also found gratitude for bringing me to where we lived. I got 10 beautiful years in a beautiful city, and I really gained so much from that chapter. So, yeah, well, it took me a little bit longer to find the gratitude there. I found it. It doesn't mean I ever want to see him again or talk to him again, but I don't hold anger anymore. I remember my grandma used to say, anger doesn't hurt anybody but you, Amber. So set it down. And she was right. The walking also helped. I started walking, and every day I would come home from work and I'd walk. I'd just walk. Especially when my nerves were elevated and I could feel the blood boiling inside of me. I just learned how to walk it out. And usually within 10 minutes of starting my walk, my system would eventually just calm down and start to regulate. I would start fast. It was almost like a pace of how I felt, and anger felt fast. So I would start walking really fast. And then after about 10 minutes or so, sometimes a little longer, depending on the day I had. But after that, I would slow down and I would settle into a calmer pace. So walking has been a tremendous addition to my life. And I encourage everyone to get out for a walk, even if it's just around your block. Walking is helpful, especially when you have the blood boiling in your system and your nerves screaming at you. All right, so now that we got all that part of my story out, I just want to remind everyone this isn't about putting anybody down. It's not about trashing anybody for what they did. But this is my story. This is what I lived. And it took me a really long time to want to tell anybody. But I realize now how important it was for me to tell my story. I've told it to my circle, the people closest to me, but I don't even think I was able to express the gravity of what it did to me and how it changed me. And I'm grateful that I experienced all of it, as crazy as it sounds, because I am who I am today because of those experiences. I don't know why I chose to have those experiences, but I'm grateful for them. And I can look back at them now and be like, all right, I see it now. And I actually can laugh about it now. Crazy enough. So just remember that when you're going through hard things, somewhere in there's a nugget of wisdom that's just for you. All right. So we're going to move along to the Brooklyn Lights the Way. This segment honors a beautiful soul named Brooklyn, the daughter of my best friend, Bridget. And even though her time here on earth was too short, her light was undeniable. And I'm grateful that I was able to be in her presence. So in her honor, each episode I want to highlight someone who has been a beacon of light, for someone who has made a positive difference, shown up with love, or helped others find their way through the dark. And since this is a brand new space, it only felt right to begin with Bridget, Brooklyn's mom, as our first honoree of this beautiful segment. Let me tell you about this gem of a soul. Bridget and I have been friends since 4th grade. We met in class, I believe during recess. One day, we both brought trolls to school. She had a bride troll and I had a farmer troll. And we married our trolls. And we've been friends ever since. We've weathered every kind of storm together. And even though life has taken us down different paths, and we've been miles apart for 17 years now, we've never lost connection. Bridget has always been one of my heroes. She's the kind of person who shows up with this bright smile or a helping hand or a word of encouragement exactly when you need it. So it's no surprise her 3 beautiful children shine just as brightly. She is a devoted, loving mother, someone who has truly sacrificed so much to give her family everything she could. She was a single mom for much of her motherhood, and even in the darkest moment of her life, when she lost her sweet Brooklyn, Bridget somehow found a way to rise and to continue to be that light for other people. I've watched her face struggle after struggle, and I've watched her rise every single time, stronger, softer, wiser, and even more refined than before. She truly is resilience in human form. She is grace in motion, and she is someone I am endlessly grateful to walk through this life with. Bridget, I love you. Thank you for being a part of my journey, and thank you for lighting the way for me and for so many others that I know you have been lighting the way for. And to everyone listening, don't forget to show gratitude to the people who have lit the way for you. Those steady lights in our lives matter more than we often realize. So if you would like to highlight someone who has been a beacon of light in your life, for yourself or for others, head over to findyourwaytovibe.com, head to the contact page, and you can fill out and submit a form there. All right, it's time to close out the first episode. Thank you for listening today and for holding space for my story. It truly means more than you know. And if any of part of this resonated with you, if you've walked through your own storms or you're walking through one right now, I hope my journey reminds you of this. Healing is not linear, but it is possible. No one has a life manual on how to do this life. So give yourself a little bit of grace as you walk through this life. And remember that we all are just doing our best, every single one of us. We may not have it all together, but we'll eventually get the hang of it. Slow down and remember that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. I am so grateful that you're here, and I'm excited, so excited to see how this journey unfolds for all of us. Next week, we will jump into some more stories, hopefully some listener vibes and some more gratitude. Until then, I hope you have a week filled with gratitude, stillness, and joy. Remember to just breathe and to find your way to vibe.